Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Skill Up, Employing Individual Development Plans to Advance Your Career and Engage Your Direct Reports with career coach and UCLA alumna, Emily Baxt. My name is Joseph Blancas, and I serve as an Assistant Director for Alumni Career Engagement at UCLA Alumni Affairs. In today's program, we'll discuss how to create individual development plans to get you and your direct reports excited about work again. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank our Alumni Association sustaining donors. It's with your help that we are able to strengthen the Bruin community with career programs like this. For some general webinar housekeeping, we'll have time at the end of our program for a Q&A with Emily, so please use the Q&A function below to submit your questions. We will be recording the event and we'll send it out once it's made available. Now to start our program, I'm excited to introduce Emily Baxt. Emily is an experienced, compassionate career counselor and coach who enjoys helping people figure out how their strengths can benefit the world. Many of her clients are early to mid-career professionals, parents returning to work, or successful professionals looking for something more. She has supported the career development of students and alumni at the University of San Diego Career Development Center for more than 20 years. She received a master's degree in counseling with an emphasis on career counseling from USD and a bachelor's degree in women's studies from UCLA. I'll turn it over to Emily to start our program.
Great, thank you so much, Joseph, and welcome everyone. Thanks for coming today. I'm going to just go ahead and share my screen really quickly as we jump into this topic. So individual development plans is one of my favorite topics because it's about growth. And so that's one of the things that is really a common thread through the different roles I play in my own career, is really helping people grow. My goal today is for you to leave with a strategy of something you can implement this week right away to get going with individual development plans, either for yourself or for your direct reports. Joseph already told you who I am, so I appreciate that introduction. Thank you for that. I am lucky that I do spend about 20 hours a week at a university career center working with alumni and students in all industries and majors, which is a lot of fun for me. And then in my consulting work, I do get to do a lot of workshops like this. So I get to talk with managers, talk with direct reports, and just really hear what's going on. I am lucky that I get to teach workshops around things like clear communication, how to give feedback, individual development plans, as well as team building using instruments like the MBTI and Clifton Strengths. I also do some individual coaching, both through organizations and individuals reaching out to me. And that's where I'm going to have some of these client stories and ideas that I'm going to share with you as we go through today. But before we jump too much further forward into this, Joseph, do you mind sharing the poll, please? Because I'd like to just ask you, those of you who are here, a few quick questions. You can see there's just 2 questions on this poll. If you will just answer those, give you a minute to do that. This will help me guide our discussion today and make sure I'm giving you the information that will be most helpful. Joseph, when it looks like we've had a majority of people answer, feel free to share those results. Okay, so just looking quickly at the results, you can all see it looks like the majority of people here are really looking at using this both for themselves and their direct reports. We'll definitely be talking about both of those as we go through today. Oh, good. And I see about a third of you your companies are using platforms like Lattice and Culture Amp. For those of you who are not familiar, those are software platforms that include sections where people can track goals and do some of the management of the type of work we're talking about today. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Joseph. You can close that poll. Wonderful. And what I'd like to do then as we get started, let's start with a reflection question. I want you to think, what did you learn last week at work? Now, if that sends you into a total panic, you could also just answer, what is a favorite part of your job? I'm going to give you 60 seconds just to think about this or jot down some notes. All right, why am I asking you these questions? Why am I asking you to reflect on this? I think for so many of us, life is fast, right? Especially at work, things are going quickly. And Sometimes it's easy to identify what you're learning, but for a lot of us, particularly if you've been in your role for a while, it can be sort of a stumper. Like, oh, what is the last time I learned something? That's where an individual development plan can really come into play. And then some people do panic on that one because they're like, oh my God, I don't know when the last time I learned something was. So we'll jump into that second question a little bit later as well. So what are we doing today? This is what we're going to talk about. We're going to look a little bit about why career development is important. So I have a little bit of the research that I did around that, so we can take a look. I'm going to have you pick a growth goal and talk about ways to pick a growth goal. And then we'll also really look at the specific ways you can design a plan, either for yourself or your direct reports, in concert with your direct reports, for figuring out this individual development plan. Let's get started with why is career development important. The quote I have here is from Gallup, some of the research they did a couple of years ago, that the number one reason people give for a job change is career growth opportunities. So this is, I mean, it's pretty, I feel like it's a truism in a way too. Like, this is something that we all probably see with ourselves, our friends, and our family. But we know to me, that shows the importance. Making a job change is a big deal. It's a lot of work. And for someone to be motivated enough to do it, it means that these opportunities for growth are really important. Some of the other research I looked at too, McKinsey had a report last year where they said, quote, people want career paths and development opportunities. And then also last year in 2021, Deloitte said career development is quickly becoming the foundation of effective workforce strategy. So this is something that is being picked up on in the research. It's definitely a focus. But what I wanted to look at is why? Like, what are the benefits? What is the reason that this is so important to people? So I was trying to look kind of more from that personal perspective. And I found a couple of things that I wanted to share before we jump into the logistics. So one of the benefits of career development is retention. And I don't think that's going to be a surprise for anyone. This is from a study this year from the University of Phoenix. 68% of the workers they surveyed said they'd be more likely to stay at their company if there were more opportunities to upskill. So people really want this. This is what I see from my clients as well. People will say to me things like, I like my job, but I feel like I'm outgrowing it. And there's just really nothing else for me to do there. So they're not being offered other ways to grow. You may have had that experience yourself. For those of you who are here kind of thinking about your own individual development plan, maybe there's not an immediate career jump or a promotion that's available, but how am I growing? And what are the opportunities that I have? Another benefit that I found that was a little more surprising, to me at least, was productivity. So productivity is really impacted by this development culture. So again, this is from Gallup. A culture of high employee development is the most productive environment for both the business and the employees. Now, when you think of this, this can make sense, right? If I'm engaged and interested in the work I'm doing, I'm going to be more productive and moving forward in that. Thinking back to my own client experiences, this reminded me, I did quite a bit of work recently with some government employees. And retention wasn't a problem for them. They weren't going anywhere. They had what we refer to jokingly as the golden handcuffs, right? They had great benefits, they had stability, they weren't going to leave. But they were missing a little something in their work. They were worried they were going to get bored even as they moved toward retirement. So looking at getting some growth in there, having some new learning can really help with productivity and keeping that energy level up. Now, the third piece of research in terms of a benefit that I looked at, I put in here because it just looked like so much fun. This research showed that people say they are happier, smarter, and more efficient in that growth environment. This was from a survey from Conversica. Almost every person they surveyed said that their brains work better and they're happier, smarter, and more efficient when they're engaged in new and challenging work. And again, just anecdotally, this is what I see both from people I work with and my clients. Just that sense of learning something new, being able to move forward can really get you excited about work. And that, of course, feeds into that retention, that productivity, and the other benefits that we've already talked about. So we've talked about why we need that career growth, why it's important, but let's really jump into how do we pick that goal? Let's start off with another reflection question for you, and I'm going to give you another 60 seconds. What do you want next from your career? Right. I know from experience from doing this workshop in person that some people are still like scribbling away furiously. They have a whole plan. They've got this whole idea of what they want next in their career. And there are other people who are just like, I have no idea. I don't know. And that's really, really common. So this is something that I see frequently with people I work with. They're just not sure what they want next from their career. They don't know how to decide. That's why I've got this blank canvas on my slide here. So this is a lot of the work I do with individual clients is figuring out how do you know what that next thing is. But I also want to look at this from the perspective of managers helping some of their direct reports. If your direct report isn't sure how to grow or how they want to grow or what they want to do next, the techniques we're going to talk about can be applied both ways. I do want to bring up privilege as we're talking about this area here. I think there's a lot of people who didn't have exposure, don't have the role models, didn't have the mentors to help them see the different opportunities that they may be able to take in their career. And this is a place too where managers can make such a huge difference by providing that mentoring, providing that coaching, and really help level the playing field for people who may not have had the opportunities to see some of the different choices that their career could bring them. So when trying to determine a career goal, these are some of the exercises and suggestions I use with my individual clients when we're working on this together. But this is something you could certainly do on your own as well. So the first area I like to focus on is self-reflection. And what I mean by that is really asking yourself some questions like, what's important to you? Where do you want to be in 5 years? What would you like to do more often? And what strengths would you like what strengths would you like to develop? Notice this strength piece is something that I use as a strengths-focused coach. So the question I asked earlier in the first reflection, where I said that you could write, what do you like most about your job? There's always an opportunity to further develop the things that you're already good at. So often when we're talking about personal growth, people immediately go to what they perceive as weaknesses and how can they shore up those areas where they're weak. And there's certainly a place in wanting to diversify your skills and build up certain areas that are needed. However, I also like to look at what are you already good at? What is an area where if you put in an investment of growth, you might be able to just have exponential improvement. So that's one, these are some of the type of reflection questions I ask. So if you're working on trying to figure out your own next step or your own career plan, I want you to use these questions as journaling questions. You can certainly write about them. You can use them to discuss with people close to you. For my managers who are looking how to help with their direct reports with this question, use these as coaching questions. So it's great to sit down with someone and say, that if you're working with them toward their next step or their career goal, ask them questions like this and just reflect back to them what you hear. You don't have to have the answer for them. You just want to be able to support them as they're exploring some of those different options. Another technique that can be helpful in addition to self-reflection is using other people, right? Using is maybe a rough word, but talking to others to get perspectives. Asking questions like, what do others see for you? What are options in your department or your company? What work do others do? So if you're doing this for yourself, I certainly encourage you to do informational interviews. So reach out and talk to people whose jobs look interesting to you. I have to recommend UCLA One, which is a fantastic platform. And I know that Joseph and Gloria are going to share the link for that in the follow-up materials here. But UCLA One is a great way to look to see who are some alums who've already listed themselves as being willing to talk to alumni. What kind of work are they doing? Who's doing something interesting? You can also look for alumni using LinkedIn and our group there. There's a lot of different ways that you can reach people, but you can also just find people in your company, people who might be doing work that you want to learn a little more about. For my managers looking to support direct reports, this is a great opportunity for you to connect your direct report with others in the company, just to be able to have a conversation, to learn a little bit more. I also, if you're in a larger company, I encourage you to encourage your direct reports to join ERGs or other committees or groups where they're going to get to meet people throughout the company where they can sort of expand their view of what's possible. The reason that we're doing this is because career growth really boils down to skill development. So this is a key idea that I want you to take away here. It's one thing to have a big picture idea, like maybe my next step, I want to be a department manager. I want to oversee the entire division. But what does that mean? Like, how do you get there? It really boils down to skills. So that's what we're going to be looking at for the balance of my presentation here. So if your career goal is a specific role, like if your plan is, I want to have this next role, the way that we break that down into skills is to review the job description for that role. Really look to see what is required and do a gap analysis between that role and where you are now. So looking at that job, what's required compared to what you're doing right now. What's this gap in between? Figure out what skills are needed so that you are qualified for that role or closer to being ready to step into that role. And it really does come down to identifying those specific skills. Now, some of you, if you're working in a larger organization, there may be really clear career maps and paths already completely filled out by your company where you can look at different rubrics about different levels of skills that you might need, and that's great. But for the rest of us, you might need to do this research on your own. So you're going to need to identify jobs that look like a next step that you would want to take, whether they're in your company or outside of it, and really do that gap analysis to identify what skills you might want to focus on. And then the key is pick one skill first, right? We're just going to do this one step at a time. Just to kind of show you where we're going here, this is another visual that is really helpful for me. If we're starting with this career goal, we want to get this down in the funnel to an action step that you can do this week. This is a way to take this larger idea and make it actionable. So we've already filled in, if we do that gap analysis and then picking a specific skill to work on, that's where we've gotten to so far. We're going to work the rest of the way down to that specific action step. So we've talked about how to pick a growth goal. Let's jump into that specific plan that we want to design here. The first thing that you have to do if you picked a skill that you want to develop is to define success. And what I mean by that is, how do you know when you've learned this skill, right? What does success look like to you? I'm going to pick an example. So if I have someone that wants to become that department manager, let's say one of your direct reports eventually wants to move into a management role, and they do the gap analysis for that role, and they determine, okay, some of the skills I need to learn are how to delegate work, how to give feedback, and I also need to get better at my public speaking skills because I'd be in charge of presenting the decks to clients. So if they picked public speaking as a skill, there's a lot of different ways to define success in public speaking, and there's a lot of levels of excellence within public speaking. So help them figure out what that means. So it could be, I want to get to the point where I can present the deck just with an outline and I don't need to look at a script. Or maybe it's, I want to reduce my filler words by 50%. So I want to say a lot less often. That's very different from saying, I want to present the keynote, at a conference that has 10,000 people. So we've got to figure out what that success level looks like for you or for your direct reports. Then comes the fun part. You've got the skill, you know what level of success you want to reach. How can you learn this? And this is where I would want you to brainstorm as many opportunities as you can and different ways to learn a particular skill. Typically, a lot of us will lean toward formal education opportunities first. That's what's going to come to mind. Taking a class, getting a certificate, or going to a conference, something along that lines. But I also want you to really think about more informal opportunities for development. This is particularly important if you do not have a budget for learning and development. So for those of you, for managers, you're like, I really want to support my direct reports, but I have no money for this. Or for those of you who are like, I'm trying to grow my own career, but no one's giving me any funding to do that. This is where you can really get some great ideas of how you can still move forward. So you can see on my slide here, I have a class or reading. It tends to be more formal, but of course the reading could be a free opportunity. Working with other people to develop a skill is a fantastic way to learn, and many people really enjoy this. So peer-to-peer learning is often underused. That's one way to do it. That could mean something like, for the example I was using with public speaking, I know that Maria is an excellent presenter. I'm going to go watch her do that presentation and take notes. Or Chris, I also know that Chris has a lot of success with presentations. I'm going to go talk to them and ask them for what tips they might have for me. So there's a lot of ways you can do that peer-to-peer learning. And then, of course, practice. Some people learn best by actually doing things. So you have to kind of think about what is the best learning style. So finding ways that somebody can just really jump in and actually start using some of these skills. Again, I'm sure that you can brainstorm a lot of different things. If you're planning this for yourself, brainstorm away. If you are working on this with a direct report, again, go into coaching mode. The question I have here on my slide, you can ask them, what are some specific ways that you think you could learn this skill? And let them brainstorm. Listen, reflect back what you're hearing, but then you can add in other ideas. So this is where you can balance that coaching with advising as a manager. You have more experience. You may have some great ideas that they're not familiar with, or some resources that they don't know about. You can help add to that brainstorm list with your own expertise and knowledge. So some people have a lot of fun with this and they come up with so many ideas and they're like, I'm overwhelmed. Other people, brainstorming is not as easy for them. And if that's the case, I encourage you to have a trusted partner, someone that can help you come up with some of these different ideas. But then the key is, where do you want to start? So you've picked your skill, you brainstorm all these ideas, you've got to pick one way that you want to move forward. And you got to commit to it. So looking at that one step that you could do this week, I want you to ask yourself too, is it specific? And when will you do it? You can hear the difference between me saying, this week I'm going to practice speaking in groups versus in Wednesday's stand-up meeting, I'm going to give our department's report. So really being able to pick something specific and commit to it, this is one of those metrics that's going to help you see, am I doing this or not? Just to go see that we filled in the rest of that funnel after you're picking a skill, it's about brainstorming different ways you can learn that skill that fit your budget, and then picking which learning method you want to start with, because then you can narrow it down to a specific action step. I gave you one example. Another might be, this week, I'm going to research when the Toastmasters meetings are in my area and what I do to join them. So something very specific that you can do this week. The idea behind this is kind of reminds me of the old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's what we're going to look at. You can't become a manager in a week. We don't even know what that means, right? But we can narrow down what are some skills I need to develop and what can I do this week toward developing that skill. This leads me to my friend, accountability. How on earth are you going to stay on task? So I can tell you right now, I have a lot of great ideas and a lot of things I want to do and a lot of ways I want to grow. My mind's always coming up with things, but if I don't figure out a way to make myself accountable, none of it happens. So for me, the way that works is putting it on my Trello board. Yeah. So anyone here who's a Kanban fan, I get that into my to-do list and I figure out where it's going to fit in terms of priority. Calendar blocking can also be super effective. So putting a little block of time on my calendar to know when I'm going to do that particular task. For my managers, again, recommending these for your direct reports, these techniques, and also adding it to your one-on-one agenda, just as a way to check in. And that leads me to the next part of accountability, which is who's going to help you? Who's going to be your accountability partner? Now, ideally, that's your manager. So it's someone who is committed. Part of their role as manager is to helping you grow. So being able to check in with that person is helpful. If that's not going to work, you can certainly have a colleague, a mentor, a friend, a family member. Anyone can be your accountability partner. The key is to make sure that you're sharing with them the steps that you want to move forward. And you want to pick somebody who's going to sort of hold you to it. If you meet with somebody, part of the accountability piece of having a partner If you meet with someone, I know at least if I know I'm meeting with somebody next week to tell them whether or not I did this task, I'm going to be much more likely to get it done. But also, if I don't get it done, this is where you as a manager or you as an accountability partner can really help. Because then it's just checking in and saying, okay, what got in the way? Why were you not able to get that done this week? What was the obstacle? What can we do to move that obstacle? Maybe that step that they picked for the week was too vague, too poorly defined, or maybe it was too big and they need to start with a smaller step. Maybe they were lacking some resources or some motivation and encouragement. So having an accountability partner can really help you clear those obstacles. And when you are the accountability partner, you can help clear those obstacles. This is probably my favorite part. And any of my clients that work with me will be able to tell you, I love to celebrate progress. And this is a piece so many people leave off. If you are moving forward in your career, if you are taking steps to help with your individual development plan or doing your career growth, you want to make sure that you recognize each step that you take. And you can celebrate the actual progress, like how you're developing that skill, or the process, the steps that you are taking to get moving forward. But definitely keep track of your growth. And this is something that I say as a career coach all the time. You're doing lots of different things, you're learning them, document those. Get them into your resume, add them to LinkedIn as a skill. If you have an annual review document, certainly put that in there. With these steps that I've been talking about, like breaking this down into individual, an action plan for that individual development plan, for those of you who are using Culture Amp or Lattice, the structure's in place for you. So the structure is right there. But these steps can help you with the content of pulling this together. For those of you who aren't using a software platform like that, you're going to be creating your own structure and tracking your progress as part of that. The most important thing here is continuing to set new goals, right? You're going to be taking that step, and once you complete it, you pick a new step so that you're moving forward. That continued progress also helps with motivation. So the more you accomplish, the more you want to accomplish, it really comes into an upward spiral and can be really, really helpful in keeping that engagement, keeping that excitement. And then also when you're tracking your progress, you have that ability to look back and see what you have accomplished. You'd be amazed how much you can get done one little step at a time, week by week, when you look back over 6 months or a year. Let me sum this up by reminding you that individual development plans promote retention, which we probably thought of, along with productivity, and make people happier, smarter, and more efficient. And the key, if you take away nothing else, I want you to think you've got to make it actionable, right? That's the key here. Having a dream, having a plan is great, but you've got to actually implement that. So pick that career goal, pick a specific skill to develop, and then commit to an action plan that gets renewed weekly. Now you can see I've got a QR code here. If you want to scan that, that's just going to take you to a form where you can put in your email address. If you'd like to have a handout summary of the things I talked about today and some of the key slides. I'm also going to drop it in. Actually, I think Joseph can drop that into the chat for me for everyone, if you'd rather do it through your computer. I'm just going to pause here for a little second to let everybody get that, what they need. I'm also doing a quick pause on my references slide. Most people don't want this, but if you're looking at the video later, if somebody wants anything that I've referenced today, it'll be there. You also have my LinkedIn here, so it's another way to reach out and connect with me. That's my content. Now, I would love to answer any questions that you may have about individual development plan.
Great, thank you, Emily. We will let the questions come in. As a reminder, if you have questions for Emily, please use the Q&A function to submit your questions, and we will get through. We'll get through them together. I did want to start off with some questions that I received in the registration. One of them being, I think, more related to identifying a team's strengths and best utilizing them for their job. So the question is, how do you recommend determining my and my staff's strengths and best utilizing them for our jobs?
Hmm. Well, I love this question because this is one of the types of things that I get to work on often when I'm working with groups. So I have to tell you, one of my favorite ways to identify team strengths, if you have funding for doing some type of formal assessment, is Gallup's Clifton Strengths product. So for those of you who are familiar, it used to be called Strengths Quest or Strengths Finder, or a couple different names that it's had in the past. Clifton Strengths looks at 4 main strengths or themes of strengths, and each person can see their top 5. So I like using assessment tools as a way to create a shared language with a team and a way for people to see that differences are positive. So that's really how I use that tool. It can be very helpful for people to understand their strengths. A lot of times people can't identify their strengths, not because they lack insight, but because your strengths are usually what you do all the time. It's just sort of who you are and what you do. You don't think of it as a strength. It's the fish in the water, right? The fish doesn't notice the water. They're just in the water. So that can be a way to give some language around those strengths and talk about them. Now, the next step that I use then is really looking at who's getting to use their key strengths every day and how are they getting to use them? How can we look at the team to see where the strengths lie and who might want to continue to develop some strengths? And maybe there's going to be a little bit of moving around of duties or responsibilities in order to accommodate that. For those of you who don't have funding to do that type of tool, there are different ways that you can do that just even on your own. Having people self-identify their strengths and then share that with the group and talk about that. That can be really powerful as well. So I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions on that if I didn't hit what somebody wanted, but that's really, I love the idea of using strengths with a team. I think it can be really powerful and help people be productive.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. That test has really helped me to figure out, what I needed to work on and what I just needed to continue refining.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that. And then another question we had from registration before we go to the Q&A, I imagine this is someone who, reports to a supervisor based off the question, and it's how could we manage our one-on-one and how to arrange questions to let my supervisor know what I need for career advancement.
Mm. Yeah, so kind of how to get your manager on board.
So they're taking what you're giving them and maybe outlining their action plan. Now, how do they communicate this with their supervisor who might not be having their career development top of mind?
Yeah, may not be thinking about that because they're busy with other things maybe.
Yeah.
So there's a couple different ways that you can approach this, but I'm a huge believer in open communication. So I think depending on what the relationship is like with your manager, I think being able in a one-on-one to say, I've been really thinking about my career growth and I've identified a skill I want to move forward in. Here's how I'm thinking about doing that. How does that sound to you? And that could be an open question if you want, or you could say, what kind of support do you think I might need? Or, whatever that question might be to kind of introduce that topic and engage the manager as a partner. So again, like if the goal is you want to be supported and have this career growth, I always say ask them how they can support you or how they might be able to participate in that or what they see, what their opinion is of that plan. Now, in some companies, the one-on-one agenda is managed by the direct report. So it kind of depends on whether or not your company uses a specific one-on-one agenda or how they might manage that. But I encourage adding that growth check-in to your agenda if possible. And if the manager controls the agenda, ask them their opinion of adding that in. Just a quick question. What did you do? What did you do toward your growth this week? Did you get it accomplished? What do you plan to do next week? Just that check-in, adding that in might be a way to guide your manager into understanding the type of growth support you need.
Yeah, another person to hold you accountable. I don't think any manager is going to knock you down for wanting to advance your career or develop yourself. So great, thank you. We're going to move over to our Q&A. We have our first one from Nikhil, and her question is, what if the skill is behavioral or emotional intelligence related? what are some ways to make that more tangible and defined and show that they've really made progress?
Mm. So yeah, that is a broad term, isn't it? Emotional intelligence. Now, the book Emotional Intelligence, I believe, names 5 specific areas for growth. So you could certainly look at what some of the common definitions for emotional intelligence are, and that might help you with this. But if this, and I'm assuming by the way this question is written, you're helping a direct report who maybe needs to develop some of these areas, it might be helpful for you before you meet with this person to really think, what are the problems? What are the issues that I'm seeing? What's the specific behavior that is either happening or not happening that I want to see? And then you can extrapolate from there. So maybe if the issue is, I don't know, there's some difficulty connecting with other people on the team. Other people, are finding this direct report abrasive. Okay, why? What is exactly happening? Okay, when I walk into a room and I say, good morning, he doesn't respond. He doesn't reply. Okay, that gives us a specific behavior to look at, to give feedback around. And maybe the skill development in that case could be totally different depending on the person. Is it a cultural piece? And this person just needs to be informed about what the cultural expectations are for this particular workplace. Is it more of an ability to communicate piece? And so talking about effective communication skills, and maybe that's something a little more specific there. And I could go on, there's other things you can kind of see how I'm working here. But I would look at emotional intelligence is really, really broad. How can we break that down? What segment in particular? And you might find this person needs growth in all 5 of those areas that are defined in the book. Okay, let's pick one to start with, or even better, talking with them and saying, like, here's some areas that I think if you develop them, they could really help you advance your career. Which one seems most appealing to you right now? And being able to get their buy-in on that. Hopefully that helps, Nick. I'll ask another question to follow if I didn't hit it.
Yeah. No, I think the buy-in is important. And it kind of is a great segue into the next question that we have, and it's from an anonymous attendee. But their question is, how do you make the development plan and action plan feel more inspiring and motivating versus an employee just feeling like it's another task to accomplish? That's the question. We had another one that was, how can I help someone get motivated or engaged at work? So I feel like they can kind of tie together.
Yes.
So what would you say for this particular question?
Such a challenge for managers, right? Because how do you motivate someone? How do you get inside someone's head and encourage them to want to learn something else? I think I would start with coaching. And by coaching, I just mean asking open-ended questions and hearing what the person has to say. So some of those questions, to kind of tie to the first question, when somebody, like, how do you get them to feel like it's not just another task? I would say talk to that person and say, I care about your growth. I know you have a certain amount of duties, but I want to make sure that you're learning something you want to learn and have the opportunity to move forward in your career. What are some things that sound interesting to you? And then maybe going into those questions, like we talked about, like, what's important to you? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Really being able to have these coaching questions and conversations with them over a series of days. It doesn't all have to happen in one day. Showing that you're interested, showing that you care, showing that this is in their best interest for their career. Sometimes that trust takes a little time to build up, but by being able to ask those kinds of questions, you'll be able to get at their motivation. Like, you may have ideas of what they need to do to move forward, but let's ask them what they would like to do, how they would like to grow and move forward. And when you can get that type of engagement, that can often help people get excited, and when you're seeing, you'll be able to see in their face too, like when they start, you see that glimmer of like, okay, they're starting to get excited about this. Tell me more about that. Let's explore that. What would that look like to you? So those kinds of questions. And okay, I got wrapped up in that. Joseph, help me remember what the second part of the question that tied in.
The second question was along the lines of how can I help someone get motivated or engaged at work?
Yeah. So that's how I would look at it. Yeah, that does kind of answer both of those. Really
Yeah.
trying to figure out what they want and what that motivates or what excites them, and then finding something that makes sense both for what they want. And of course, that makes sense in their career and for your company. Obviously, it's not going to be like, what I really want is to learn how to ride a motorcycle. Well, unless you're some kind of like career delivery company, that's probably not going to be relevant. So being able to help them find things that they're excited about for their career.
Mhm. Great, thank you for that. We have a couple other questions. One of them, again, is from an anonymous attendee. And I feel like you touched on this a bit, just about, using Clifton strengths to determine individual strengths. But the person asked, I would like some advice in how to identify my individual strengths. My manager would like me to find strengths that cannot be outsourced by others.
Ooh, I love that. I love that question from the manager, because that shows that person's looking to protect you in your career development, finding what you have, what's special to you. So yeah, again, Clifton Strengths is sort of a shortcut, in my opinion, because you get to ask, you ask the questions and you answer them, and it'll pull some things. It's not perfect. No personality assessment is. But what I like about that tool is it provides you with some language and examples that help you reflect on your own experiences. So being able to look at the Clifton Strengths report, one of the first things I'll tell people to do is read through this and tell me what parts really sound like you. So it's finding that connection point, like which are the parts that resonate. And then we look, now that you have the definition of these strengths, thinking through that lens at your past experiences, how have those strengths helped you to be successful? How have they helped you to accomplish what you've accomplished? And then that also helps you then look to focus toward the future. How could these skills help you be successful in the future? Now, your manager might be talking about a more tactical skill, something very specific. I don't know, like how to use Tableau to write, data reports or something like that. But if you're looking at sort of the intangibles and the ways that set you apart and help you be strong and successful in certain areas, I think using those kinds of instruments can be a good starting place. But again, you don't have to use an assessment. You could certainly just think of your greatest accomplishments. Think of what you're proud of, and really just spend some time writing or talking about those to see, how did I do that? And what helped me in that? Was it my ability to form relationships with people? Was it my ability to create, negotiate and create a happy conclusion for everyone? Whatever it is, we can put some language around those specific skills. And then once you find what you're good at, continue to develop those, turn them into an area of expertise.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. We don't have any other questions in our Q&A. I think you kind of touched on the last one about engaging your direct reports and just wanting them to create a plan for growth. I think it's important to just get that buy-in and to ask those open-ended questions that allow them to kind of dig deeper, and questions that are thought-provoking for them. So if anyone has any other questions, I'll give it another minute for you to send them along. But Emily, any other final thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience today?
Absolutely. I always have something to say. I would just say, as you're looking at your career, remember that growth comes in a lot of different ways. So sometimes it is a promotion or that next job, or changing companies. It can, that's, I think, what we think of traditionally with that career growth. But remember that development is something that can happen every day. And looking at a specific skill, growing a specific skill can be incredibly exciting. It can be motivating. And then it can open up opportunities that you're not even thinking of. So it's a way to keep your own excitement and energy around your career for yourself. And then again, if you're a manager and working with direct reports, sometimes the people that seem unmotivated might just need to be asked, what is it? They may have an idea of what they want to do and no one's asked them, or they may have no idea and no one's ever asked them those kinds of questions that might help them. It's not a solution every time, of course. Sometimes there's just, for whatever reason, a problem with fit. But being able to provide that support as a manager, to provide that coaching, to show that interest in their development can actually sometimes bring about a greater level of engagement and excitement. If anyone has questions too, if you think of questions later, you have my contact information. Please feel free to reach out. I love working with individuals. I really love working with teams and coming in and working with groups, but I'm also able to, answer quick questions by email often.
Great. And one final question for you before we close. Are there any recommendations for publications, podcasts, or resources that people could tap into to spark ideas of ways to grow that you, off the top of your head, can think of?
There's so many good ones. I'm looking to see if one of my favorite books is on this shelf next to me. Podcasts, I can tell you some of the things that inspire me and things that I like to listen to. Harvard Business Review has a number of excellent podcasts. Women at Work is one of the ones that I like to listen to. I also enjoy Gallup, has a couple of different podcasts. So they talk about strengths and developing people. So I really enjoy that one. The book that I'm trying to see where it is on my shelf and I just can't find it. It's called Designing Your Life. And that's an excellent book. It comes out of from two authors at Stanford who work with the design lab there. And that's a great way to look at how can I move my career forward without needing it to be a perfect plan? How can I ideate my way forward? And they also have a second book called Designing Your Life at Work. And that's about job crafting. So really, it's not about changing your job. It's how do you take your existing job and make it something you enjoy even more. So just off the top of my head, those are some of the things that I look at and read and really pull inspiration from.
Nice. Yeah, we are throwing them into the chat, but we'll also send them out in a follow-up email as well for anyone who would like those. Thank you, Gloria, for doing that.
Thank you. Gloria, I need you to follow me around in my life and just pull everything I research, pulling the link to everything that I'm talking about. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for answering that last question. So everyone join me in thanking Emily for being here today and sharing her insights and experience with us. We truly appreciate it. So thank you. Before we close, thank you. Before we close, I'd like to encourage you to complete the follow-up survey that you will receive once the webinar ends. It'll pop up as soon as you end the webinar. We'll also be sharing out via email and via the chat a link to RSVP for our next Career Coaches webinar, Breaking Bad Habits, taking place on Wednesday, September 28th at noon. So please, if you're interested, RSVP for that. Other than that, thank you for joining us today, and go Bruins.
Go Bruins. Thank you.
Thank you.